Welcome back. The U.S. and Western officials are seeing signs that Ukraine's counteroffensive is already underway. Military intelligence officials tell CNN that Ukrainian forces have begun testing Russian positions with artillery strikes and ground attacks, searching for vulnerabilities. And this long-awaited counteroffensive is expected to be carried out on multiple fronts. This is nearly 16 months after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Joining us this morning is Mark Esper, who served as defense secretary under President Trump. Secretary Esper, good morning and thank you.
Good morning.
What needs to happen for this counteroffensive to be successful?
Well, I think what needs to happen is what seems to be underway right now. They've been conducting shaping operations for the last couple weeks or so, bombing refineries, knocking out rail lines, et cetera. But now we're in the phase that we call reconnaissance and force, where small armored units go out and probe this 600-mile front line, if you will, to try and find the weaknesses and the strong points. And I think once they figure that out, you'll start seeing the main effort emerge very quickly, along with supporting efforts to really push the Russians back in both the east and the south. And it'll be quite dramatic, I expect.
Mr. Secretary, one of the things that I've picked up over the course of the last several months, both here in the U.S., talking to U.S. officials, but also talking to European counterparts as well, I think was captured by David Ignatius in the Washington Post this morning. I want to pull it up. It says, quote, "If Ukraine can drive back an already shaky Russian army, it stands a chance of forcing Moscow to bargain for an end to its failed invasion. But if Ukraine fails, it would be a bitter blow to the country's weary population and could endanger continued support from some restless NATO members." And I think the question I've had leading up to this moment is this kind of a do-or-die moment, to use a poor cliche, for the Ukrainian forces, for Ukraine in this conflict right now?
It's a very significant moment. Everybody is looking to Ukraine to be very successful. I was in Europe 2 weeks ago for about 2 weeks, and the number one question over there is, where is U.S. support? And everybody fairly thinks that if Ukraine does well, U.S. support will continue. If not, it could wither. And if U.S. support withers, then a lot of other countries will go with it. So it's very important, I think Ukraine understands this politically, not just militarily, that they have a very successful counteroffensive that shows people a return on their investment in the Ukrainian military.
We know that some groups of Ukrainian pilots have just started traveling to the U.K. to get trained on these F-16 fighter jets. There were lawmakers in the U.S. who said we should have been training those pilots before we even made the decision to allow the F-16s to go, because it takes months, at least 4, to get them trained up. Are they necessary in this counteroffensive at the front end?
I think it would be very important to have them on board now, but clearly it won't happen. I mean, when you're conducting a combined arms offensive, which means heavy armored forces, mechanized infantry, artillery, et cetera, it would be helpful to have a long-range strike aircraft that could hit targets deep, tactical air support from those units as well, and then help clear the skies of Russian aircraft. But that won't be available. And I think, look, the administration is to blame for being late in terms of delivering the most vital items, whether it's Abrams tanks or F-16 aircraft.
Mr. Secretary, to poorly paraphrase one of your predecessors, you go to war with the army you have, not necessarily the army you want. But there's been some divergence, I think, between what U.S. officials have been saying publicly about the readiness of Ukraine, of its forces in this moment, versus maybe what the reality is behind the effort to kind of surge equipment. Do you think Ukrainian forces are ready to have a successful counteroffensive?
From what I can read in between the lines, and I've talked to a lot of folks in Europe recently, they have enough, but they could do better if they had far more, particularly, of course, again, F-16 aircraft to support them. It's unclear whether they have the numbers of tanks they need. But look, at this point, they have to move forward on the counteroffensive. They need to push the Russians back. They need to show success, because it'll not just help them on the battlefield, but it's going to help them, again, with Western allies and continued allied support.
John Bolton has an interesting opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal today where he takes on the Biden administration, particularly on Iran. That's not surprising. What is surprising, or not surprising, and what is interesting, I think, is how he ties together what we're seeing in terms of alliances and changing alliances and the close relationship that we're seeing between China and Russia, how the UAE and Saudi Arabia play into it, given the increasing concerns about Iran. Here's what he writes. The UAE and others are also now more open to Russia and China. These tectonic developments augur impending strategic failure for America and its key allies. Do you agree?
Well, look, we need to shift toward a focus on China as the greatest strategic threat we face in this century. but we have to do so in a way that doesn't create a vacuum in the Middle East. Clearly, China wants into the Middle East. China is a net energy importer, which is why they want access to both the Middle East and to Russia, by the way. And so we have to maintain a presence. I think the administration needs to work on its relationship with Saudi Arabia and others in the region. But look, we also see Iran emerging. It's now like a top weapons supplier to Russia, as is China. So you see these blocks kind of shaping up out there in the global environment.
What do you mean?
So it's important that we stay there.
Sorry to step on you, Secretary, but what do you mean by the administration needs to work on its relationship with Saudi Arabia? President Biden went there to the consternation of many, fist bumped, and then OPEC just slashed productions.
Tony Blinken's there right now.
And Blinken's there now having these meetings with a very cordial statement that came out yesterday. Well, what does improvement look like to you, or work on look like to you?
Well, I think work on is Tony Blinken's visit. I think that's important. But clearly, the relationship is not where it needs to be between us. I mean, we saw a few months ago China brokered that peace treaty, if you will, between the Saudis and Iran, and that was not a good development. So I think it just requires work, not just with the Saudis, but the UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, others in the region to which we have a long-term relationship.
Such a dynamic and fascinating situation. Mark Esper, thanks as always, sir. Appreciate it.
Thanks. We'll see you guys.